Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming back once again. Now is the moment to get to know LAC Plus, an initiative of artificial intelligence of IDP. So we are going to invite our Maria Paz Hermosilla, director of COBLAC from the University of Ribaños, Cristina Pompo, social of IDB, and Miguel Orrua, coordinator of the digital cluster of IDB.
Como la hora del almuerzo siempre es un poco difícil, yo voy a
Since
aprender
at
como a
lunchtime
hacer
it's a little bit more complicated, I'm going to break protocol and stay standing up so we don't fall asleep while we digest.
cuando puedan la presentación, porfa.
Whenever the presentation is ready, I would like.
Ok, no se está viendo en las otras pantallas, no importa, solo se ve en esa. Los que están en la mesa
So
redonda,
those of
¿sí se ven en
you,
pantalla?
do you see it on these
¿Solo
two
los veo?
screens? Because I can only see it.
¿Sí se ven?
No, you can't see it?
Ahora sí.
Okay, now we can see it.
Bueno, pues buenas tardes.
So good afternoon.
Muchísimas gracias por
Thank
la
you very much
invitación.
for the
Para
invitation.
mí es un honor
For me, it's
estar
an honor to
celebrando
be
los 20
celebrating
años
the
de
20
Red
years
y
of
estar
the Red
invitando
Helk.
a hacer muchas
And in
cosas.
20 years, a lot of
Como
things
pueden ver en
happened. We
el
saw that
video,
yesterday in the video,
lo
and
hemos
we have
intentado
seen
hacer
this
a través
throughout
de
all the
nuestra
conversations that we have
tecnología.
had throughout these days.
Y cuando hablamos de inteligencia artificial,
And we talk about artificial
muchas cosas han
intelligence.
pasado.
In 20 years,
En
much
estos
has
4
happened, but in the
años,
last four
en la región
years,
también han
in
pasado
this
muchas
region, there
cosas.
is a lot of things that have
Y
happened as
hablo
well.
de 4
I'm
años
talking about 4 years
porque en
because in
2019 empezábamos con
2019, we started
FAIR.
with FAIR.
Empezábamos a
We
ver que los
started to see that
algoritmos
the
involucraban
algorithms
a los gobiernos
into the
que habían
governments of Latin
desarrollado
America and
y se
the
veía
Caribbean.
como la nueva
And you could see the
solución
new
para los
solution
viejos problemas
for
de
the
las
old
regiones.
problems of the region.
Por ejemplo,
For example,
Salta, en la provincia de Argentina,
Salta in the province of
tenía
Argentina
un importante
that had an
algoritmo o
important
decidió desarrollar
or
un
decided
algoritmo
to
para
develop an
predecir
algorithm to predict
embarazo adolescente
a
para los
teenage
niños entre
pregnancy
15 y 19
between
años.
15 and 19
En
years of
Salta,
age. In
el 20%
Salta,
de los embarazos
20% of
eran de mujeres
pregnancies were
adolescentes.
teenage girls.
El algoritmo
The
dijo,
algorithm said,
o se supone que
or we
con el
suppose,
algoritmo
that with the
desarrollado
algorithm
se
developed, they were
predecía
going to be able
con
to
un
predict with
86% de certeza
86% of
qué
certainty
niñita iba a quedar
what girl
embarazada en
would
los
end up
próximos 5
pregnant
o 6
in
años.
the next 5 to 6 years.
Para algunos eso sonaba muy bien,
Some that sounded
pero las
pretty good.
críticas
However, the
no
criticism
tardaron en salir.
was not
Primero,
far
usaban
behind.
datos
First, they used
de
data
los
of
hogares más
only
pobres de
the
la provincia,
more
no de toda
poor,
la población.
impoverished homes, not of the whole
Problema
region.
sesgo de
So there is a
datos.
bias in data.
Segundo, no se involucró
Second, they did not
ni
involve
a
parents,
doctores, ni
educators,
a
nor
ni a los
teachers,
médicos.
um,
Muchos de
medical
los
professionals,
interesados
nor those who are
no estaban
interested.
involucrados en el
They
proceso
were
de
not involved in the
desarrollo ni en la
process, nor in the
implementación.
development nor
Y
implementation of this
tercero, no
project.
había una
And third,
respuesta de
there was
política
no
pública.
public
Es decir,
policy
se tenía la
response.
información,
So you had
pero no había una
information, but
claridad
you did not
sobre
have
la
clarity,
intervención
the
para
intervention that
resolver el
would
problema.
resolve the problem.
Casos como
In
este,
cases
pero
like
que no son
these,
el único,
that were not the
más
only
que
case,
se estaba,
plus
más que se estaba empezando a
that they
implementar
were beginning to implement
en ese momento,
GDPR at that time,
nos dio las
gave
bases para
us the
que desde
base so that
pudiéramos
from the
nosotros
IDB,
ganar,
we could create the
apoyar a los
initiative to be able
países
to support
a
the
adoptar
countries
inteligencia
adopt
artificial de una
artificial
manera
intelligence in a
responsable,
responsible
para
way
que críticas como
so
esta
that
se
criticisms like
resolvieran
these
desde el
could be
principio.
resolved from the
Muchos de los
beginning.
que
And with
estamos
many of
aquí
those who are here today,
trabajamos desde ese entonces
we work
en
since
FAIRLAC.
then in
¿Y qué
FAIRLAC.
logramos?
So what do we focus
Varias
on? We
cosas.
focus on many things.
Primero,
First,
durante esos 4 años
during these
trabajamos
4 years,
en
we
apoyar a los
worked
gobiernos
supporting
en adoptar
governments
los
in
principios y
adopting
las recomendaciones que estaban
principles and
surgiendo,
recommendations that were
tanto el sector
coming up, whether
público
it
como
be
el
in the
sector
public sector
emprendedor,
as well as the
los
business
principios de
sector,
la OCDE y las
principles of the
recomendaciones de la UNESCO.
OECD and of
Estas
the UNESCO. We
herramientas
developed
complejizar, eso era
tools,
lo que te estaba
and
contando,
that is what I was telling
estas
you. We
herramientas
developed
prácticas
practical tools
para que los
so
gobiernos
that
y
the
los formuladores de
governments and the
políticas
formulators of
pudieran
policies,
pasar
the
de los principios a
policymakers
la
could
práctica.
go from principles to
Y
practice.
desarrollamos pilotos
And we also
para el
developed
uso con distintos
pilots or use cases
sectores
in different
para
areas where we
aprender
could see
sobre las mejores
regarding the
prácticas de
best
privacidad,
practices in
transparencia
privacy and
y sustentabilidad
transparency and
ética.
ethics. But the moment we are in today is different. It is no longer 2019 nor the situation that we were living at that time. ChatGPT and the pandemic helped make artificial intelligence closer, bring it closer to our day to day. All the fear regarding if humanity is going to end or the risks that we are seeing, or as Jose was saying yesterday, that so some who are talking around the world saying that it must be regulated, they're making the conversation come to a change. And the questions now are not regarding recommendations or principles, those already passed. So now is the moment to talk. And now we are debating, and you have seen here regulation, norms, governance schemes. We are in a critical moment, it's true. And the questions are different. The question is who in charge of making the rules to make sure that we're there in these norms or in these guidelines. The questions are also coming up because governments and countries are not only regulators, but also users of this technology of artificial intelligence. You have talked about the case uses that exist. It has to do with uh, different subsidies and rates. And there are many cases where in customs, for example, and they're realizing that they cannot take to the digital world the inequality that we're seeing in the physical world. And that is why I'm saying that in the last 4 years that a lot has happened. And now that in 2023, we are rethinking and assessing that FAIR LAC from 2019. So therefore, we call it FAIR LAC Plus. And these are the services or some of the things that we have worked on from different spaces in the bank to be able to support the countries. We are having conversations that are much deeper regarding regulation and good practices and governance and implementation, supporting us with developments and abilities and development of abilities, and not just the development of uses. FAIRLAC Plus is what helps with a dialogue for the 400 biggest businesses in Latin America and the Caribbean that make policy recommendations regarding the applications from industry. We are ensuring that those recommendations have an ethical component in what they carry out. We are developing a network of research and development centers, and it has to be at the head of what is happening. And the last index of Stanford University shows that 85% of the papers regarding AI come from the industry. I think that there's quite a bit to do still there. And not long ago, in Senya, we have the index of artificial intelligence of Latin America. And in the system, we are also working on creating a tool that we call fAIr Venture, so that when the risk capital funds are doing their due diligence with startups, they're making sure they can see if they're using AI in a responsible manner. And we're doing big boot camps with the business people to understand what the principles mean. So this is just beginning. And I think we still have quite a bit to talk about. The dialogue, it's not easy, but if it was easy, we wouldn't be here. So I would like to invite, and I found this picture that I thought was beautiful. I would like to invite Maria Paz Hermosilla, who was already presented and with who we carried out the ethical algorithms here in Chile, and Miguel Porrua, who is a digital governance guru in the IDB, to see what we can do from FAIRLAC and the Red HEALC to see what we can do in this area. Now I will take a seat. Thank you.
Bueno, muy bien. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for being here today. We are going to, the idea is to have a conversation among the three, but we gave space. If we have time, to have a few more questions from you as well at the end, because in these kind of issues, there's always more questions than answers, which is good. However, the idea is that the questions can be established among us all. I would like to ask you to all get within context. What is the progress of artificial intelligence in Latin America and the Caribbean? What is happening? What world are we in? First of all, I think that we are seeing a higher adoption sign, and the studies are showing this. For example, in Colombia, recently they published 112 systems of automated, not all of them are artificial intelligence. In Brazil, there's an NGO that have a map and it says it's more than 40 systems. In Chile, from GovLab, from the University Adolfo Ibáñez, we have a repository of public algorithms where by the end of the year we will have more than 100 systems in which more than half declare to be artificial intelligence. And there's a growth by the governments. There's more strategies. You even mentioned, I believe, yesterday that there's more countries with strategies. There's many bills. There's a push towards regulation. We also have spaces to measure, like the index that was created between Senia and other institutions. And we are seeing how things are going forward with enthusiasm. There are still certain parts of the Caribbean, at least, and we have the impression that there is not much happening because at least the Caribbean islands declared in the IAC Forum of Ethics that they're very interested. However, they do not have much progress, at least some of them. And in that sense, I do not know much about the Caribbean. But in Latin America, I do feel that there is a drive towards the adoption of AI, and international organisms or bodies are also pushing it, and they all have their office, CAF, IDB, the OECD, World Bank, etc. So we see a scenario that is thriving. Well, Chris, thank you for such a generous presentation. The good thing is that almost everybody know me, and I'm no guru, I'm no expert of anything. However, I am a very avid learner and interested in everything having to do with artificial intelligence. I think the situation of the region Maria Paz described it very well. I would say that, and you also showed it well with fAIr LAC, one of concern within the society because something is coming very strong that we do not know and could generate some kind of damage. Let's say it that in that sense, and also in the sense of the public sector that has to try to place order and certainty, and we don't know exactly how to handle this, and also anxiety in the private sector that says there is a lot of money here, right? A lot of money, and when we started and this is being pushed by algorithms. And I think something reasonable is being carried out that most people, everybody is trying to get into one part of the picture. There's a lot of events, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of workshop documents, as you were saying. However, we still do not know how to take strong steps. That is why what you showed makes me I'm pleased with what you showed because I do believe that there are tools that are going to be useful for all of us to be able to work together. So, from my concern, uncertainty and anxiety in the region. And remembering something that Luis Porto said yesterday, the hypothesis of the red queen that makes us all think, is this a case where it should be the opposite? We shouldn't run so fast. Maybe we should think about it with more calm and more calmly. And everything you were saying regarding the implementation, laws, what problems are coming up? What things are not coming out right regarding all of this run that the countries are having?
I would say that one important thing it is a lack of transparency in the implementation of these systems. Research studies that have been done, but not many. In Chile, we have a cadastral algorithms with the Council for Transparency 2021. 80% of the systems declared by public services did not have information in the webpage of the public body. Other NGOs as Digital Rights have done some research in many other countries, trying to do some use cases, and they have found some walls in order to access information. Information is not available. They're not willing to provide it. So that is one issue, one topic, the lack of transparency. And we need to think in the legal framework of data protection, which are more modern, where there's a right to know when there is an automated decision. And that automated decision affects people a lot. So the modern regulation of data protection sets that right, which we need to make available somehow. In Latin America, we're not having research, as in Europe and the US, allowing us to having some algorithm audits, having evidence, deep and sustained and based evidence of discrimination, Republica, of the prediction model of reincidence, research, which is as the ones being done in Europe, there are some social benefits algorithms there. So there's a lack of knowledge, may take a risk. There are some emblematic cases, such as the one that you mentioned. It was a big flaw. They didn't really understand that adolescent pregnancy is a social problem, not technological. And how it was addressed, it was like a technological problem or issue. So in Chile, for instance, Valparaíso, we implemented a phase acknowledgement, recognition phase to miss, to, they didn't really do it. They understood that they thought they were working with biometric data, and therefore there were some people against that. So I would say that we don't really know which are these problems or issues. We have some intuitions of which they might be. Implementation in healthcare, for instance, where we need to be careful how we implement that in healthcare, because if a system of cancer detection, esophagus cancer implemented in Chile in private hospitals, public ones, how does it work for men and women? Does it detect with three more mistakes in men or in women? Hopefully not, but it is already implemented and we don't really know the way it works. So it is like we're implementing something in some. I mean, I appreciate the words. I don't know who mentioned this yesterday. One of the representative of doing it in case of low risk. I would start doing it with low risk cases. I would be really careful how we advance in high risk cases, such as in healthcare, because problems may occur because of a lack of, I don't know, algorithm justice on algorithm equality. So that is my appreciation, my thought. So what I rescue from what you have said is that it is good that we think in technological solutions. It is good. I'm thinking in this tool, but we need to address it from social problems that are there, present, being citizens, because we're trying to put citizens at the very core of this. We need to understand that cliche, right? And we need to understand it deeply. Miguel, following to what you said in the description of the region and what it is like, which is the approach, main approach, that you believe governments should have when talking about artificial intelligence, or in the conversation that you have in this network in some other spaces, which is for you the approach that it should be followed, considering also the consequences of the problems that have been that Maria Paz already mentioned. Well, reacting to this $1,000 that you paid me to do some publicity to CERLAC, CERLAC reflects a lot of the approach that artificial intelligence require. I'm not going to call the whole league, but I was an apprentice in this joint sector with OGDI. We talked about artificial intelligence and data, and the region needs a policy requiring or including many other things that we have mentioned. First of all, we need to realize everything, according to what Maria Paz just mentioned. Regulating in algorithms may be audited on how and by whom, creating an institutionality around AI, where it's not there. And many multilateral bodies say that there must be governance mechanisms giving participation to all the stakeholders. So that's why I got happy that in your slide you have academic centers, you also have the civil society, private sector experts, and so on. So there's some governance mechanism there. So we also need creating some space to develop the sector. Of course, we need that. Regulating, I mean, it is not one against anyone. It is in order to favor everyone, protecting human rights and helping the private sector to get developed. So that's why this joint venture, it is also good to mention it. But that also requires a public policy. We're going to need some data. This consumes data. It lives from data. It eats data. And in our region, we're still missing data. And we're missing good quality data and good quality control systems up until we don't have policies about it, then the rest will have to wait for. I'm talking about infrastructure. We're not talking about much about that. We were at a meeting some time ago when we discovered that these in artificial intelligence um, elements are requiring a lot of storage, processing, and in some places that it does not exist. So we need policies having many of the elements that you described, which are going to organize the sector. Governments should have at least two approaches. One, promoting boosting innovation, promoting this and boosting this. And this is really important. And the other line, it is promoting responsibility. So what does responsibility mean? That institutions implementing AI should be in charge of the effects that that produces, especially when the effects are negative. So we're observing interesting things there. Here in Chile, for instance, this Chile Compra public purchase agency, depending from the treasury, created a standardized format for buying AI that wants to make life easier for public bodies trying to buy something and also suppliers and vendors. So every time this service is bought, it is done differently. It is not done differently because sometimes people don't really understand everything, different formats, different structures of requests from the different vendors or requests for proposals. So having this, which is a tool that promotes and organizes things and provides a useful tool for the state for buying AI in a better way, it is so useful. And besides those bases, they have some ethical standards, a language type clauses. If you need the vendor to accept an algorithmic audit, assuming that you will have to do it in the future. So the language is there in order to be inserted into the contract. So it simplifies making accountability. Transparency systems vendor need to give you some things so you as a body transparent different models. So that is the type of things that are included in this responsibility approach, and they also include this promotion approach. We need to balance those two things. So all of this has to do with, it has to go with some budget allocation. We need to include funding in all of this conversation, in this debate. I'm thinking that in what you were mentioning, Miguel mentioned it at the beginning. There's some fear and some thrill or emotion and responsibility and motivation and the different approaches that we're observing. On the one hand, we have Europe with the laws they have, the USA. On the other side, this new executive order. We also have what G7 mentioned, this intermediate, Hiroshima intermediate law. Is there any country having some laws, appropriate laws, or who are working on that in those bills, laws, acts? How do we regulate that? I would say that we need data protection, which is robust. And of course, that doesn't really exist in many countries. That is one important topic or issue. I believe that before advancing into artificial intelligence laws, we need to build the basement of this house. And this basement, for instance, if there's because in some countries are much better in data protection than others, Panama, Brazil, I understand that bills are quite good there. But some others, such as Chile, were in prehistory. So we need to build the basement of the house, a bill for data protection, and some other laws may also apply for this. There are some arbitrary anti-discrimination laws in some of the countries. They may also apply to AI. I don't know if it is necessary in this very moment to regulate artificial intelligence. I believe that we need to advance more in some governance of data and some other things which are providing that space and creating spaces before some other laws, such as the one for anti-discrimination, in order to address some aspects which may arise from algorithms or in healthcare. We have some sectoral regulations for health. All the countries have some mechanism to approve a medical device, right? They're not going to use any device at a surgery, at a hospital. So in those places, we should insert mechanisms, regulatory elements, in order to AI in healthcare, as FDA is doing it in the USA. So I believe that we're still, in terms of AI laws or acts, I'm not so favor. I'm not for that because we're still missing the basement for the house, so it doesn't sink. For this to be fun, even though if I agree with my president, I would have said no. So I believe we need to stand up. We need to think because basically, when the person who is almost, I mean, the father or the mother of all of this, the one who created this GPT, and he leaves the company, and he says, I mean, he's afraid or scared for what was to come. So when they say, let's stop here for a while because this is so powerful, we need to rethink it. So, for the first time in mankind history, we have something in our hands that runs the risk of dominating men or affecting men a lot, men and women, the humankind, right? Mankind. So I believe that we need to think about it twice because so far in history of not regulating technology, well, it helped creating many multinationals companies with many billionaires. But the ones policymakers, the message for them was if you wait too long, it's going to be too late. In order to regulate everything that happened with social networks, with elections and fake news and all of that. So we're a little bit late, a little bit too late there. So I want to confess that I don't want to do that. We need a deep conversation, dialogue. So there, even though I am from Europe, I like the USA approach, creating a dialogue amongst legislators and different sectors, technology sector. And they visit Washington quite so often. So they should explain all of the implications so legislators know. And from knowledge, they could also legislate in a better way. So our region needs to do the same. We need to have the legislative power to know a bit more about it. And leaders of the sector power need to know this, and all together we should know what to legislate and where, and up until where. But skipping some time or waiting too much, it may lead us for this to be too late. Europe said that there's a legislation which is solid and robust with a structure of risk and so on and so forth. We know it, but if that's the chance of the options, well, we need to still think about it and talk about it. In the morning, Jose told me that he had gone to La Moneda many times to talk about institutionality. And I was thinking about it. Maybe that for AI, institutionality needs to be different. That governance of AI doesn't need to be different from the governance that we have or we use for other tools which are popping up or appearing. Because why AI? Why do you need AI and not other emerging technologies? How does it work? How does AI governance work? Well, right now it is so, I mean, separated. In one of the small groups, one of the panels in the afternoon, we were talking about this. And I have a list of 6 areas, different areas, where there were aspects related to, I'm talking about areas of the government where there are some functions or attributes or attributions related to AI. So I believe that in each of the countries, one sector will need to adopt leadership and articulating this with some intersectoral tables and conversations. But I'd like those areas to be the areas of data, hopefully, because in the end, AI, it is one way of analyzing data. It is more complex, of course, but I believe that over there, that would be the ideal place to be. In some places, such as in Chile, it is at the science ministry. So it would also, it depends on where it is, but wherever it is, there must be a good articulation amongst ministries. And we'll know how difficult that is because of the natural silos that public administration has. Basically that. Yes, the answer is yes. It is going to be an institutionality and a governance which is going to be so different from what we know so far because the private sector will have a role which is more important than in many other sectors or than many other sectors. And as I mentioned that about Google, we need to highlight that Facebook and some other ones said, please regulate these social networks. And that shows a willingness. They are willing to have this conversation to be something in that institutionality, in that governance, to participate even more, because it can be in order to benefit the business, and not just to limit anyone or to avoid growth. Yesterday we heard Joao over there, yes, known as Asimov. right, predicting the future. He talked about with high enthusiasm how Portugal government is using AI in some interesting solutions. So no one, I believe no one in this room and outside this room wants to stop that. No one. But we don't want to lose control of it, not to create any harm. So the governance is going to be rather different. And it's going to have a more active role from society and the private sector than in some other models or some other sectors. That makes me think. And before we go into the questions, because we're running out of time, it really got my attention observing the Korean experience when they showed the experts, when they showed the strategy of digital transformation and the group of experts. There was like 12 faces up from the private sector and 4 from the public sector. So I thought in our strategies in Latin America, most of the public sector, it is going to be there. So it made me wonder. We have 5 more minutes. Would you like to add anything else? Any other service that you think LAC Plus should provide to these countries, or shall we go into our questions from the audience? I believe that international bodies such as IDB and FAIR, they need to help articulating conversations amongst countries, because otherwise, whom, right? So in that sense, within what you just mentioned, there were some spaces of conversation, regional space conversation, and I believe that is so very important. Because if we try to create some regulation covering, including all of the global companies, technological companies, there's no way to do it if it is not regionally, for instance. So in that sense, promoting, boosting this space for conversation or exchange at an industry level or at academia level, as I saw in the functions, I believe it's something so necessary. And NOR really has that mission of coordinating everyone. So there's an interesting space over there. Swiftly, a role I don't know if it is clear. It is promoting STEM, tests, pilots, or demonstration cases. Plenty of cases where society is shown the value of AI. We need to try. So it is useful for traffic, healthcare, security, and so on, and case uses with low risk, low risk. So in Chile, they're using satellite images for uh, controlling some companies. Interesting way, and that saves a lot of money, and it protects the environment, and at the same time, it allows salmon producers keep on working if they're doing according to the rules how environmental was approved. So those systems are so interesting. They're implemented here in Chile by the superintendents of environment. So there's plenty of value for AI, and I believe that that should be shown. Everything should be shown in some open source that could also be shared. Incentives and responsibility. We have 5 more minutes. Questions, comments, complaints, congratulations. So we're going to listen to some 2 or 3 questions, and then later we're going to answer them. Jose, please, the floor is yours. So I just want to say that this topic, it is extremely wide, extends, and the urgency, analytic urgency, it is making an effort of structuring. We may not talk about artificial AI globally. There are many different distinctions to be done. And I suggest there are 2 development paths. First, as a substantive strategy. What do you need, or can countries do? That has to be defined, because, I mean, from there, that is a starting point. Many of the designs may arose from there. In my case, I offer AI or automation mechanisms advanced strongly in order to improve productivity of the state in critical services. I believe that is one of those. I mean, healthcare is one of the elements with all of the safeguards, but the level of difficulty for serving healthcare services here in Chile is gigantic. There's no possibility if we don't use technology in order to advance that with safeguards. I mean, that is a strategy, and we're going to concentrate there. No, talking about strategy, as Herbert well said yesterday, there are some things that we cannot regulate. We need to be realistic. We're not going to regulate AI here in Chile at all, right? So we need to be able to know where we can influence and how we're going to some coalitions as well. And the other line, it is risk. We need to insist on what Joao mentioned yesterday. We need to identify those low risk spaces. Of course, over there, we need to make an effort for controlling risk control effort, which is different. Data, it's not personal information, it's a different beast. And in many cases, the mechanisms of AI are much more trivial, and we know them all. And besides that, they are not decision-making spaces. So that is one. It is an analytic corner with a low risk. Another cases are sensitive data of decision making. If we don't do this mapping, we may spend too much time in atomic technology analysis in this field, and we're not going to advance because we're going to be tied up between the the desire of innovating and the fear and risk. So we need to start making decisions. We need to start working, and we need a roadmap. So in a second stage, we can have more specific policies.
Muchas gracias. Quizás mi pregunta.
Thank you very much. Maybe my question goes more towards the laws. You say we can't norm artificial intelligence. However, my question is considering our reality of our public management, how can we norm or guarantee that there can be the good use of artificial intelligence, or at least in the development of this artificial intelligence in the different countries? Because since we are exploring and developing that where there can be a lack of ethics, or it can affect one of our sectors, so financial sectors, and it can be end up being more damaging than beneficial. So how can we guarantee that those who are developing artificial intelligence in other countries or in our countries can do it in an ethical way without applying norms or laws, or without obligating them to be under a norm? And the second thing is, I don't know if we could have a proposal from FAIR to have a roadmap model in which the countries can sit down and say what is step number 1, 2, and 3, and analyze a little bit the index of artificial intelligence development, and to be able to use that as a base, so that at some point when we want to go forward in this issue of artificial intelligence, what subjects or what issues can we start with? Thank you. We continue with Uruguay, and then we answer the questions. And then just one more, to respecting time. Due to an illusion, first of all, congratulations. The panel was very good, very interesting to listen to all three of you. And regarding this, I would like to take what was said at the beginning. I think that for the region, it's very important to have the regulation of the environments that haven't been regulated yet. In the case, for example, of Uruguay, that both laws are 15 years old, the public form and data protection, and they have constantly been modified and modernized. There is many things that the AI could not do. And there's a specific article of the 16, the law of data protection, that says databases that are automatic, and it is prohibited to have automatic recollection of data, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say artificial intelligence, but in reality, it's talking about automatic motors, and we could be talking about ChatGPT, for example, or any of those solutions. So I coincide 100% in that the most important thing for us, I believe, is the regulation of the environments where technology can be deployed. And here we have two big scenarios, data protection on one hand, and on the other hand, transparency, accountability, or the controller of citizens towards what happens with their data. As an example, and I coincide with you as well, and that is why I'm not so concerned with maybe the speed of regulation, specifically speaking of technology. In 1860, that's the first time we had a car with internal combustion, and it wasn't until 1945 that they had the first norms of circulation, and where they indicated which side they had to go on, etc. And then they started adding norms regarding safety, and then regarding the environment, and then energy matrix. But up till today, nobody has regulated the size of the cylinder or the piston. So it's been a lot of years until there was a regulation for the first time in an encounter. And I think this time there is a great parallel. So for me, once again, the most important thing for the region is to have regulation of environments so that the technology can be deployed. Thank you very much. So quick reactions because time is running out. Yes, I rescue what Jose was saying regarding these low risk spaces that we need to incentivize. Um, you can review public algorithms, and there are many cases of that are low risk that are very interesting. For example, the Health National Fund, they automated the acceptance of normal medical leave, and they left for human the part that has to do with the rejection of a medical leave, and it reduced that process, which is necessary. This is, we're talking only about health, but that way those cases where it was approved automatically, then they had less time before they had to wait to be able to be paid. And in that sense, we have to use satellite use to be able to control, to be able to help protect the environment, for example. And then in another case, how can we go forward with responsible use without a norm? Well, part of fAIr LAC that already is in its third year, it's based on this model. How do we go forward without loss, but using tools that regulate public policy rules that already exist? Chile Compras has a standardized basis to be able to buy any article. Digital government had guides on how to design in a responsible way. The Council for Transparency has the faculty to interpret transparency law, and they're discussing a draft of norms for the public sector that has to do with an interpretation of the current law. So taking the things that already exist, with certain adjustments, we can start incentivate responsible use, but that it was not going to be without self-regulation, certification, the companies training, incorporating these issues at the developer levels, because there is no vendor capable at this time. The experience we have, it shows us that there's a lot of space to learn and to provide these services. I think that Maria Paz responded all three issues. I would like to let you close since we don't have much time, the mother of fAIr LAC. So thank you very much. Once again, we end up with many questions and conversation issues as we were talking about yesterday at the table we had regarding governance of data in artificial intelligence. So we will continue in fAIr LAC with this conversation. We can support in all of these conversations. After, then I will send you my information so that we can continue working on this, because as Jose was saying, this is large, very broad. And how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. So that's the way we are going to do so. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Maria Paz, Hermosilla, Cristina Pombo, and Miguel. And now I would like to leave you with Luis Madariaga. He is a member of telecommunications development. He is a member of state modernization in the public system and Ministry of Finance in Chile. And he is also in DIPRES, responsible for financial administration of the state. And from his origins, pushing the process that assesses technologies of information in the state, DEVATIC, and he is also going to share with us the technological investments, some results, and some challenges.
Aquí el botón. Sí.
Muchas gracias por la presentación. Muy buenas tardes a todos.
Thank you for this presentation. I would like to greet you all, and I am very happy to have the honor to share with you the experience that we have had with the Ministry of Finance and with the SECPRES in digital governance in this process of assessment of the investments in digital transformation. This came up a few years ago, approximately 5 years ago, with the need of being able to balance resource demands for technological purchases regarding capabilities of financing from the Chilean government. The Ministry of Finance was also very interested at that time through the modernization program. I remember a few years ago, I was in that program as well with the team